Charles Darwin. It's a name that carries some serious weight, right? For some, he's a scientific hero. For others, a pretty controversial figure. But here's the thing. No matter how you see him, you can't deny this one fact. His ideas changed everything. So today, let's pull back the curtain and really get into the story behind that world-changing idea.
Okay, so to truly understand Darwin's big idea, we have to look past the iconic image of the man himself. You know the one. We need to go beyond the beard.
Let's be real. When I say Darwin, this is the image that pops into your head, isn't it? This wise, stern, almost mythical figure from some dusty old history book. It's the face you see on statues and in textbooks. But that static, serious portrait, it hides the real story. And this is where it gets so interesting. The myth, the caricature, paints him as this old, established theorist. But the reality, the Darwin who actually came up with this earth-shattering idea was a young, vibrant guy, completely obsessed with nature. I mean, he loved collecting beetles so much his own father once worried he'd be a disgrace to the family. He wasn't some stuffy academic, he was an explorer through and through. And it was that adventurous spirit that led him on what was probably the single most important journey of the 19th century, a voyage that would give him all the raw material for his entire theory. So at just 22 years old, Darwin hops on a ship called the HMS Beagle for what turns into this epic 5-year trip around the world. And everywhere he goes, he's just observing, collecting, and questioning everything. In Argentina, he finds these massive fossils of extinct armadillo-like creatures right next to modern seashells. Kind of weird, right? Then he gets to the Galapagos, and he starts noticing something really odd about the birds. You can just imagine his mind reeling with questions. He's basically a detective, collecting clues to a mystery nobody even knew existed. Like, why do these extinct giants look like supersized versions of the armadillos that are running around today? And why does a mockingbird on one island have a slightly different beak than its cousin on the very next island over? These weren't just random facts to him, they were pieces of a giant puzzle. And all of these clues, all these little puzzle pieces, started pointing toward one single astonishing and, for the time, downright heretical idea. He started to wonder, what if life wasn't static? What if species changed over time? And get this wasn't some thought he had years later looking back. We can see it right there, in his own handwriting, in the notes from his voyage home. He knew, even then, that what he'd seen had the power to completely flip the scientific world upside down. Such facts undermined the stability of species. You can almost feel the ground starting to shake. So he gets back to England with this absolute bombshell of an idea. But instead of announcing it to the world, he goes quiet. And for years, his revolutionary theory would live only in the pages of a secret notebook. For 20 years, I mean, just think about that. He sat on what he had to know was one of the most important ideas in human history for 2 decades. Why? Well, he knew that to challenge the established belief in a fixed, divinely created world, he couldn't just have a hunch. He needed an airtight case, built on a mountain of evidence. And this is just an amazing moment. In a private notebook, just a year after he got back, he draws this simple, branching sketch. It is the world's first evolutionary tree. And above it, he writes these 2 cautious, quiet words, I think. It's the moment the idea truly took root. Over those 20 years, he figured out the engine behind that tree of life, natural selection. He realized there's this constant struggle for survival out there. So picture a bird species where some are born with slightly stronger beaks. If the main food source is tough nuts, well, those birds are more likely to eat, survive, have babies, and pass on those strong beak genes. Over generations, the whole species starts to have stronger beaks. It's a beautifully simple, yet incredibly powerful, creative force. But simple or not, he knew exactly what he was up against. In 1844, he finally let his secret out to a close friend, and this is how he described it. That's not just a scientist being cautious. That's the sound of a man who feels like his idea could be seen as an attack on the entire social and religious order. So, after 2 decades of keeping this incredible secret, what on earth could possibly force him to finally go public? Well, the answer is a classic tale of scientific drama. You see, another brilliant naturalist, a guy named Alfred Russel Wallace, was working halfway across the world in Indonesia, and on his own, he came up with the exact same theory of natural selection. So he writes it up and mails it to the one person he figures will understand, Charles Darwin. Can you imagine Darwin's shock? After 20 years of meticulous work, he'd been scooped.
While that lit a fire under him, Darwin raced to publish his life's work. On the Origin of Species finally comes out in 1859. And the public reaction? It was immediate and it was intense. The entire first run of 1,250 copies sold out to booksellers on day one. Clearly, the world was ready to have this conversation.
And a firestorm it was. Society was totally split. You had these fierce intellectual showdowns, like the legendary debate at Oxford, where a bishop famously asked Darwin's defender if he was descended from an ape on his grandmother's or his grandfather's side. At the same time, the popular magazines just turned the whole thing into crude caricatures, branding him as the guy who said we all come from monkeys, which, by the way, On the Origin of Species never actually claims.
But here's the thing, if you actually push past all the controversy and read the book, you find that Darwin's vision wasn't bleak at all. It was filled with this profound sense of awe. His famous closing lines aren't a confession, they're a celebration of life's incredible, beautiful diversity. The caricatures and the controversy eventually faded, but the idea itself, it only grew stronger, totally reshaping science and our understanding of our place in the universe.
So, what's the ultimate takeaway here? Well, his legacy is just monumental. Within about a decade, most scientists had accepted the fact of evolution. His theory became, and it still is, the single unifying principle for all of biology. It's what explains everything from why a bat's wing and a human hand have the same basic bone structure to how millions of species branched out to fill every corner of our planet.
And maybe nothing captures his final standing in history better than this one fact. When he died, he wasn't buried as a heretic. He was honored as a national treasure, a scientific giant right up there with Isaac Newton, and he was laid to rest right beside him in Westminster Abbey, the ultimate symbol of acceptance from the very establishment he was so afraid of upsetting.
So, the young man who was obsessed with collecting beetles ended up giving us a whole new story of creation, one written in fossils and DNA. His theory is the absolute foundation of modern biology. And it really leaves you with a fascinating question, doesn't it? What's going to be the next big idea that changes everything we think we know?